All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome into our weekly live. We're going to share the screen here and we'll get going. Thank Oh, there we go. All righty. And we're rolling. So today we are going to be talking about the importance of breathing and breath work and how that impacts how we go about our day. It's a much bigger part of our existence than we really realize, which sounds kind of goofy because if you ask anybody and you say, hey, what are some things that you need to do in order to live? Breathing would certainly be at the top of that list, right? But the way that we breathe and the way that we think about breathing also plays a big part, and we tend to kind of skip over that a little bit. So we're going to go over a couple of different kinds of breathing, proper breathing mechanics, improper breathing mechanics. We'll talk a little bit about posture, those kinds of things, and how that all ties together in terms of health, right? So first thing we're going to kind of talk about is there are a couple of different ways that we breathe, right? The main way that we tend to breathe is through our chest and shoulders, okay? So if I were to say to anyone, hey, just on the street, I'd be like, hey, take a deep breath. They would go, right? That's how we would take a big, deep breath. However, that's not the most efficient way to breathe. And it actually can sometimes be a contributing factor to muscle tightness, that feeling of overall soreness, rib cage pain, any of those kinds of things. Those all can tie in together and can play a very important role in how we feel and how we move. So first kind of little diagram here. This shows how we're supposed to breathe, sort of. So this guy kind of right here says chest expands. We don't really want our chest to expand a ton. It should really be our lower rib cage that is expanding when we breathe. So if you look kind of right through here, so when you inhale, we want to fill the lungs, right? When we breathe through our chest and shoulders and we raise the rib cage up in order to breathe, we really miss out on, it fills kind of this area with a lot of air. We miss out on this deepest lobe of the lung, and that's what makes it a little less efficient. Okay, so what we want is we should expand kind of right around here is where you should notice the biggest expansion. It should be right at your lower rib cage, kind of between the bottom of your sternum and your belly button. Okay, because as we can see here, the diaphragm, this little pink guy right here, is supposed to drop. Okay, so it contracts. So these 2 points get pulled closer together, which in this case would drop the diaphragm down like this. It allows the lungs to expand down this direction. It allows that lower lung here to expand downwards as well as outwards. And so then we get that full lung capacity. We get that really big, deep breath. And that's truly how we fill the entirety of our lungs. Plus, our rib cages are supposed to articulate in 2 different ways. They talk about a caliper motion and a bucket handle motion are the 2 terms for it. One, and that, the one motion is, if this is your rib cage, if these are your ribs that come together at your sternum, it's supposed to move like this when we breathe. Okay, it's supposed to articulate like this. Okay, so if this is the bottom of your rib cage, it's supposed to move like this. Okay, the little muscles in there are supposed to relax. In between, the little muscles in between your ribs are supposed to relax, and allows for that expansion of the rib cage. Okay, and then as we exhale, our diaphragm relaxes. Okay, it takes a little more of that upside down U shape here, and then your sternum here will compress or contract. It'll come back to that more resting position, right? That more upright position. So with that, when we breathe mostly through our neck and shoulders, up through our chest and shoulders, we don't get that movement here. And so we're not exercising the little your intercostal muscles are what they're called, the little muscles inside your, or in between each of your ribs. We're not getting those muscles to move. We're not getting them to work. And so that can sometimes play a part in when people talk about just like overall tightness, particularly through their back and in between their shoulder blades, because that lower rib cage isn't getting that expansion. Excuse me. So the next piece of that, along with we're not getting those little muscles to work, that affects how our lats move. It affects how obviously how much work our diaphragm gets. Your diaphragm is a muscle that we obviously can't see. However, it's very, very important in terms of stability. Okay. Whenever people talk about core stability or core strengthening, one of the things that should be talked about kind of at the top of that list is your diaphragm. Because whenever we do deadlifts, or whenever we pick something up, when we pick up a child, when we pick up a bag of groceries off the ground, or a basket of laundry, or a box when we're moving, we have to brace our core, right? When people say brace your core, people think about like, oh, I'm gonna flex my abs like I'm gonna flex my abs like someone's gonna punch me. What that actually means is we need this diaphragm to contract in order to create what they call intra-abdominal pressure, because when we breathe in and we push this down, now this diaphragm here shortens, like we said before, it kind of flattens out like that, and it creates, we've talked about this before, if you've watched any of the videos on any of our previous videos on bracing and lifting, I'll talk about this a lot, this diaphragmatic bracing that has to occur in order for us to be stable. So what does that really translate to in real life? Like I said, picking something up off the ground, or squatting, or getting up off the floor. You know, you're playing on the floor with your kids. Getting up off the floor requires some core stability, requires some core strength. And in order for that to be efficient, we have to have a strong and a contractible diaphragm. And same kind of thing when we breathe through our shoulders like that, we don't breathe using our diaphragm, so our diaphragm's just kind of chilling there. It's just hanging out. It's not doing anything. So like any other muscle, when you don't use it, you lose it. It gets weak. And so they've done some research on bodybuilders and powerlifters who have passed away, and they take a look at their cadavers. There's a they call it statistical significance. Okay, so that just means that there's a meaningful difference in the thickness of their diaphragm versus people who, versus other people, regular people who aren't powerlifters, bodybuilders, that kind of stuff, because powerlifters, bodybuilders really work on being able to control their diaphragm well. And again, that's part of what allows them to for bodybuilders, it allows them to hit some of those poses. For powerlifters, it allows them to move a lot of weight without hurting themselves. Again, you'll see these guys deadlift 800-900 pounds, 1,000 pounds, and they don't, blow a disc out of their low back. Part of that is due to the fact that they're able to create a lot of intra-abdominal pressure using their diaphragm, because they have strengthened their diaphragm, because they have worked on it. Now, obviously, the vast majority of us are not powerlifters and bodybuilders, but that doesn't mean that it's not applicable to us, because like I said, getting up off the ground, getting up out of a chair, picking something up off the ground, all requires that bracing. So breathing like this, breathing using your diaphragm, breathing through kind of that area, like I said, between the bottom of your sternum and your belly button, uses that diaphragm drops, that diaphragm contracts, and it helps strengthen that. Like I said, it helps fill those lower lung fields, those lower lobes of your lung. And so it allows us to be a little more stable as we move through space. Okay. So that's kind of the musculoskeletal benefit of breathing like that, right? Now, there are a couple of other physiologic benefits that we get from that are sometimes very, very important, and for certain people can be very, very helpful in regulating stress, regulating anxiety, regulating even I would even go so far as to say like panic attacks and those kinds of things. How you breathe can have a profound effect on all of those things. So let's talk about why. So you have your 10th cranial nerve is called your vagus nerve. Okay. Your vagus nerve is in charge of a lot of stuff. Okay. It exits, as you can see here, from your brainstem. Okay, right there, that's where it leaves what they would consider your central nervous system. And then it kind of comes out and it wanders around all over the place. All of these things off to the right are the things that it affects. Okay, so you'll see your heart, your lungs, your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, your kidneys, your bladder, and then also reproductive organs, right? So this is a very wide reaching nerve. And as with all nerves, this, passes information to and from your brain to your to and from your brain to your body. Okay. Brain out to the body, body back to the brain. What makes this nerve kind of unique is its wide reaching effects. Obviously, like we just went through, it covers a lot of systems of your body. In particular, with regards to breathing, how you breathe can help control what they call your vagal tone. Okay, so that is the excitability or the how ramped up your vagus nerve is. So again, it goes to your heart, it goes to your lungs. It is what controls heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing rate. So again, implications of that. If your vagus nerve is really amped up, it's really hyped up, it's really going, that's going to increase heart rate, increase your blood pressure, and increase your breathing rate. What does that sound like? It sounds like anxiousness. It sounds like, panic. It sounds like anxiety, right? It sounds like your fight or flight response, because that's what it is. Okay. Your fight or flight response is what determines how you respond to a situation. Okay. A lot of people, most of us have heard of your fight or flight response. It shows up in stressful situations. It is the result of, it is your, they call it your lizard brain, right? Like, it's the part of your brain that's been around for the longest. It is designed to keep us alive. So when we were running from lions and tigers and bears, oh my, out in the woods, a couple hundred years ago, well, not even necessarily living in the woods, but life used to be very, very hard, like hard in different ways than it is now. Survival was a much greater accomplishment then than it is now. Your fight or flight response, your sympathetic nervous system is what that's called, is designed to keep you alive. And so when this turns on, when this vagus nerve gets really amped up, it turns on that survival response. So again, turns up your blood pressure, it turns up your heart rate, it turns up your breathing rate, it turns down your liver function, pancreas function, intestinal function. So it affects your GI tract. It affects how you digest food. So if you think about it this way, if we're stuck in a constant state of increased vagal tone, so this vagus nerve is constantly ramped up, that's going to mess with your digestion. That's also going to mess with your ability to sleep. It's going to mess with your ability to function. It's going to mess with your ability to calm down, right? It's also going to affect fertility. It's going to affect going to the bathroom. All of those things end up under this vagus nerves in some degree, under this vagus nerve's jurisdiction. So being able to calm that vagal tone, being able to lower that vagal tone is very, very important for all of these different aspects of life. Breathing can play a large part in that. One of the things that we recommend to patients a lot, particularly patients who have a lot of stress in their life, whether it's work or family or physical stress, trouble sleeping, trouble, getting their mind to calm down, is box breathing. Okay. So as you can see, we got a diaphragm here. It's called box breathing because it looks like a box. What you do, it's very simple. And again, the way that we breathe, the way that we do this matters. We're not breathing from our shoulders. We're not breathing from our chest. We're not breathing from up here. We're breathing from here. We're breathing from, again, that area right between your belly button and the bottom of your sternum. So the reason it's called box breathing is because you do them all for the same increment of time. This says 4. If 4 seems like a really long time, you can start with 3, you can start with 2, and then kind of build your way up. If 4 seems like no problem, that's too easy, then we can go for 5 seconds. I know of people who will do this for like 10 seconds in each direction. Those people have worked hard on mastering this and also are in very good cardiovascular shape. So that plays a part in it as well. So as this diagram suggests, you inhale for a count of 4. Okay. So you would inhale, then you would hold your breath in for a count of 4. And then you would exhale for a count of 4. So nice slow exhale. And then you hold out at the bottom for a count of 4. Okay. So that's, again, box breathing, 4, 4, 4, 4. And you go round and around and around. Doing this for even just a couple of minutes particularly, again, I'll recommend this for people who have trouble sleeping, doing this for 3 minutes before you go to bed, or 3 minutes while you're laying in bed, focusing on your breathing, focusing on where that breath has come from, helps calm that vagal tone, helps drop that down. So it's not, we're not, it helps get us out of that stress response. It helps get us out of that fight or flight response. If your mind runs, it helps you focus on something. Okay. Laying there, like, again, typically before bed is when people will use this, or in any kind of stressful situation, but particularly before bed, your mind just kind of goes, right? All of a sudden it's down, it's over here, and then something else happens and it's over there. And then you think of this, and then you think of that, and then you got to do this tomorrow, and you got to do that next week. This technique helps calm your mind as well, because if you're focusing on 4, 4, 4, 4, it's a lot harder to accidentally wander off, right? So that's a technique that I recommend for people, because it really, really helps relax. It helps your body relax. It helps your mind relax, which are both awesome things. One more thing with vagal tone, because again, because this is super important. This is a chart of that so again, it's called your autonomic nervous system. It's your fight or flight response versus your rest and digest. Okay, so they call that, so your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight response. Your parasympathetic nervous system is in charge of they call it rest and digest. So that's going to be everything else, everything that's not designed to keep you immediately alive. So your parasympathetic nervous system deals with like digestion and sleep and going to the bathroom and reproduction and all of those things. Okay, so when they talk about increased vagal tone, okay, when we talk about that fight or flight response, as this starts to ramp up, okay, so once we get into this kind of red area here, this fight and flight, you can see what we've got here. It says fear, anxiety, worry, concern, panic, rage, anger, irritation, frustration. Obviously not a mindset and a physiologic state that we want to spend a lot of time in. Right? Again, this was designed to keep us alive. It was designed to be turned on for a short period of time. We run away, we survive, turn it off. Okay, go back to what we were doing before. So fight or flight in the middle. Freeze is kind of another level of that, where people just kind of shut down. But which is also involved in your vagal tone, but that's a little bit of a different response. So this lower version of vagal tone, okay, where we kind of this straight white line here, then we got this little teeter back and forth right through here. That is how our body is designed to do that, because there are going to be things in everyday life that are stressful, right? There are going to be things that, things at work, people at work who stress us out. Family can sometimes be stressful. Physical stress is a natural part of life, and sometimes that's a good thing, because again, we got to be able to use both of these things, because they both have their uses. So being able to having good regulation of that is the key. Sitting up in this, up through here where we're in the fight or flight or freeze is not good, because it wears out your adrenal glands. You have cortisol, which is your stress hormone, that gets gets way ramped up, and it's not a good place for your body to be all the time. So down through here, it says ventral vagal tone, which is that like decreased vagal tone. Also is a better place for your body to be long-term, but we got to have some stress in our life, right? There is such a thing as good stress. And if we don't have that good stress, we get lazy. Honestly, we get lazy. We get super self-absorbed, those kinds of things. A little bit of stress is good. A little bit of stress is a good thing for your both mind and body. But anyway, back to breathing with this. Again, as we ramp up through that fight or flight response, as we ramp up through that increased vagal tone, at any point through this section here, when we're going back up, controlling your breathing will help bring that back down. So controlling your breathing, paying attention to how you breathe, where you breathe, when you breathe, doing that box breathing, doing just like focused breathing, can help bring that back down to a more, manageable level, quote unquote, normal level. Which again is part of the reason why focused breathing is so important, and paying attention to how we breathe is so important. When we breathe through our chest and shoulders, again, when we breathe up here, we're not getting that diaphragm drop, we're not getting that lower lung field full. It's like going to be a lot harder to calm that vagal tone breathing that way. Okay, so a lot of stuff on that one, but that musculoskeletal function, again, getting that rib cage to expand properly, that's also going to affect how your lats, your subscapula, you got a lot of musculature that surrounds your rib cage is going to function. We also have that vagal tone. Again, that's going to be more of that physiologic response, stress, how your organs function, all those kinds of things get thrown in there. They all are in that box. The last thing that might interest some people is athletic recovery. Breathing like that, breathing through our chest and shoulders, again, is a very inefficient way to breathe. Breathing through your diaphragm, as we said before, allows for that lowest lung field to be full of air. Okay. And so when you're trying to recover, again, whether it's, if you're in a running type sport, or if you're playing soccer or basketball or football, any of those kinds of things where you get small breaks, how fast you can recover makes a huge difference. And so breathing, this diaphragmatic breathing, helps recover faster, it drops your blood pressure, it drops your breathing rate, it drops your heart rate. Heart rate is one of those big limiters of athletic performance. So in order to recover, you got to drop the heart rate back down. You got to cool the body off, which is naturally done when some of these other things fall into place. But just kind of another little interesting bonus in paying attention to how you breathe is it's going to increase your recovery rate. All of that to say, there are tons and tons and tons of benefits to being aware of how you breathe, controlling how you breathe and when you breathe. And all it requires is a little bit of intentionality. It's not hard. It's not difficult. It may take a little bit of time to kind of figure out exactly what that feels like, because it is oftentimes very different than how a lot of us breathe throughout our day. Part of that comes from we tend to tense, we tend to tighten up in our shoulders, so then they're naturally a little bit lifted. So that's part of the reason why we tend towards that type of breathing. The other piece of that obviously is like this kind of breathing makes like your lower rib cage stick out a little bit. And to be quite frank, we spend so much of our lives caring about what other people think of us and how we look and all these perfect things that we don't want to let our stomach stick out, right? This is a very functional aspect of life, and it's very important that we do it correctly. So that's part of the reason why we tend to breathe. That's part of the reason why we tend to breathe through our shoulders, but it's not a good reason to not breathe through your diaphragm. So again, all of that to say, we should be breathing from our diaphragm, from down here. This is the area that should be engaged. Why is my pen not working here? Come on. There we go. This is the area that should be engaged. This is the area we should breathe through. And again, so many health benefits for it, and not really any tons of work required. It can take a little bit of practice sometimes just because it feels weird, and because we've probably been breathing other ways for so long that habit takes a little bit of time to break. So just being intentional about it, taking a couple of minutes, a couple times a day will make a really big difference in creating that habit and how we naturally breathe. One last thing I kind of want to touch on, this Wim Hof method, as you can see right down here. Wim Hof, this guy was I believe he's from Sweden, and he does a lot with breath work and what that allows the human body to do. This guy, they call him the Iceman, because he'll literally, he goes to some of the most frigid places known to man, and he just wanders around in shorts and a t-shirt, and he's not cold. And he contributes it to the amount of work that he has done in controlling his breath, which then allows him to control certain parts of his physiology. And I mean, there's a lot of people who use this. There's a lot. This guy was the first guy, but he's not the only guy. It seems to be something that can really, really be helpful for, again, controlling your own physiology. So whenever there's, again, anxiousness, even like panic, rage, anger, any of those things, being able to control how your body responds to them will affect how your brain responds to them, and then how you emotionally respond to those things. So if you want to do a little more research, again, it's called Wim Hof. Just type that into YouTube or Google, and it'll be 8 billion hits and lots of information, lots of crazy stuff out there. But super interesting, something to, again, kind of keep in mind if that's something that you want to maybe explore a little bit, because this guy does some pretty crazy stuff. And again, he attributes it to his work with focused breathing. And so that's kind of a cool, the human body is capable of a lot of cool things, and this is one of them. So all of that to say, how we breathe, where we breathe, and when we breathe are all super important, both to musculoskeletal health, physiologic health, mental health. All three of those are components of, or breathing is a component of all three of those aspects of life. Super important. That literally dictates how we interact with the world. So, like I said, it's not hard. It's pretty simple. It sometimes takes a little bit of practice, but it's definitely worth it. If you feel like, hey, this is kind of a lot of stuff, I don't really know what to do with it all, it's a little overwhelming, schedule a consult with Dr. Jeff or myself. Like I always say, we love talking about this stuff with people. Check out our website, www.myadvantagelife.com. Call the office, schedule a consult. We'll go through some of the stuff and help you with it as much as we can, along with any other things that you really want to tackle on your health journey. So, like I said, www.myadvantagelife.com. Hop on our website, check it out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.